When the others came up, he was still slashing at him, almost unconsciously. He was like a wild beast thirsting for blood. The Turk, still living, was reduced to a shapeless and bloody heap of pulp. He had lost all semblance of human form. The blood formed in pools on the melting snow. Ognyanov turned away in disgust from this butchery and thought to himself, "It's a savage revenge, but justifiable before God and one's own conscience. It's bloodthirstiness, but it's a good sign. The Bulgarian has been a sheep for 5 centuries. It'll be well if he becomes a wild beast now." Hello, and welcome to Samuel's Fortress. I'm your host, Kirill, and today we'll be discussing the Balkan uprisings of the 19th century. In the last video, we discussed the Bulgarian national revival that occurs throughout the 19th century and the gradual reforms that the Bulgarian nation achieves, the creation of an independent Bulgarian church, the Exarchate, and the creation of cultural institutions, which are financed by Bulgarian merchant guilds and which are the backbone of this Bulgarian national revival that occurs throughout the 19th century. However, during this period, we also see militant uprisings, revolutions also occurring in the Balkans. We can see this first occurring in the early 19th century, at the turn of the 19th century, in the early 1800s, with the Serbian uprisings. There are numerous Serbian uprisings that are part of the quote-unquote Serbian Revolution. Again, this occurs in the first few decades of the 19th century. Also in the 1820s, we also see the Greek War of Independence, basically the Greeks liberating themselves from the Ottomans. And during this period, we also have a lot of Bulgarians who are participating in these Serbian and Greek revolutions. During this early period, there's not a lot of hostility for the most part between Serbs, Greeks, Bulgarians. It's kind of seen that they're all in it together in this fight against the Ottoman Empire. They kind of work together to, again, liberate their respective territories from the Ottomans, and therefore you have a lot of Bulgarian revolutionaries fighting alongside the Serbs and the Greeks in their respective revolutions. Now, the Bulgarians will gain military experience during these Serbian and Greek revolutions, and once those revolutions are completed, these veterans, you could say, will begin their own revolutions. Basically, these are small-scale uprisings in Bulgaria during the 1830s through the 1850s. Now, one of the main characters that emerges in this early Bulgarian revolutionary period is a man by the name of Georgi Rakovski. Now, Georgi Rakovski is a very radical, militant, revolutionary figure. He is kind of the father of the Bulgarian Revolution, and he differs ideologically, strategically from these merchant guilds, like we talked about in the last video, who try to establish a Bulgarian nation through more conservative reforms. Basically, they're trying to build institutions, build a church, petition the Ottoman Empire for various rights. They take, like I said, a more conservative tactic towards the creation of a Bulgarian nation. And Rakovsky does not agree with this. He has a famous statement that the Bulgarians lost their freedom by the sword, and now they must regain it by the sword. So he doesn't agree with this slow process of reformation. He is very much inspired by the Serbian Revolution, the Greek Revolution, the various revolutions that are going on in Western Europe during the middle of the 19th century. So again, he takes this more militant, revolutionary tactic with the goal of liberating the Bulgarians from the Ottoman Empire. So what Rakovsky does is he kind of foments revolution not only in Bulgaria, but he also tries to gain support in Greece and Romania, in Serbia. And Rakovsky's main goal, obviously he's trying to liberate the Bulgarians from the Ottoman Empire, but his main goal is to form a an Orthodox Christian Balkan Federation. Basically, he thinks that the Balkan nations are individually too weak to protect their own interests, that they will fall under the influence or under the influence of various powers, whether it's the Ottomans, Russians, the powers of Western Europe. He thinks individually they're too weak to protect their own interests, whether those interests are religious, cultural, and so forth. So what his goal is, like I said, is to form an Orthodox Christian Balkan Federation in which Serbs, Greeks, Bulgarians, Romanians will come together to form a federated state which will defend their interests collectively. And I don't like injecting my own opinions into these videos. I try to keep it as unbiased as possible, but I will say that this Orthodox Christian Balkan Federation is still a good idea today. But nevertheless, that's Rakovsky's goal, and he's pretty much going around. He's prolific in publishing books, periodicals, trying to spread this idea of an Orthodox Christian Balkan Federation and so forth. He also will form these armed guerrilla bands, cheti, basically, throughout Bulgaria, which will form the core of this revolutionary movement. His organization, composed of various cheti, will be known as the Bulgarian Legion. Now, unfortunately, Rakovsky will die pretty young. He will die in Bucharest in 1867 at the age of 46 from tuberculosis. However, he will have successors. The three most famous successors of Rakovsky are Lyuben Karavelov, Hristo Botev, and Vasil Levski. Now, these three individuals, along with Rakovsky, are kind of the forefathers of the Bulgarian Revolution. And of these three successors of Rakovsky, Karavelov, Botev, and Levski, Levski is the most famous today of the three. Levski, after Rakovsky's death, kind of takes control of this revolutionary movement and becomes the leader of the Bulgarian Revolutionary Central Committee. He will then spend the next 2-3 years going around Bulgaria, setting up these secret networks of armed guerrilla groups, which will fall under the umbrella of an organization called the Internal Revolutionary Organization. Now, unfortunately for Levski and for the Bulgarian revolutionary movement, he is captured by the Ottomans for this revolutionary activity, and he is hung by the Ottomans in the year of 1873. Basically, Botev will be the most, Hristo Botev will be the most active revolutionary after Levski's death. However, Botev will also die 3 years later in 1876 during the failed April Uprising. And then, unfortunately, Karavelov will also die 3 years later in 1879, just like Rakovsky, in his mid-40s from tuberculosis. So we see here in the span of 12 years from 1867 to 1879, the death of the four most prominent Bulgarian revolutionaries, Rakovsky, Levski, Botev, and Karavelov, in very short succession, one right after the other. Now, I mentioned a failed April uprising. Basically, in April of 1876, the Bulgarians tried to stage a revolutionary a uprising, basically a revolution, an armed revolution against the Ottoman forces in Bulgaria. Now, this is not successful. Pretty much, it's not very well planned, and it's too premature. There's not a lot of support from the populace as far as men ready to join the uprising. We'll talk about this later, but this is kind of the same as the Ilinden uprising in the early 20th century in Macedonia. It's too premature and is quickly put down by the Ottomans. Now, the Ottomans don't just kind of let this go. There are very brutal and merciless reprisals by the Ottomans against the Bulgarian populace for this April uprising, and this can this can be seen, these reprisals, most famously at the massacre of Batak. The Batak massacre is a massacre that occurs in the village of Batak in Bulgaria, where roughly 5,000 Bulgarian civilians are brutally massacred. They are raped, tortured, burned alive, pretty much the most brutal behavior you can imagine at the hands of the Ottomans. And Batak is not the only place where this occurs. There are widespread massacres, reprisals throughout Bulgaria after this failed April uprising. Now, there is massive outrage at these reprisals, at these massacres throughout Europe. There are articles being printed in British newspapers, German newspapers, Russian newspapers, condemning the Ottomans for this this brutal behavior towards the Bulgarian civilians, towards the Bulgarian populace. And this outrage, this international outrage, is most pronounced in Russia. The Russians, who see the Bulgarians as their kind of Orthodox Christian and Slavic brothers, are furious at this Ottoman behavior, and the Russians will declare war on the Ottomans in 1877. This will be known as the Russo-Turkish War of 1877 to 1878. Now, what Russia does as a result of these Ottoman reprisals against the Bulgarians is it invades the Ottoman Empire. A Russian force invades the Ottomans in the east through the Caucasus region. It also invades the Ottoman territories through the Balkans. Basically, the Russians cross the Danube into the Bulgarian territories and attack the Ottoman Empire. The Russians are supported by Bulgarians, Romanians, Serbs, and Montenegrins. So what the Russians initially do is they start sieging Ottoman cities, Ottoman fortresses in the northern portions of Bulgaria, between the Balkan Mountains and the Danube River. Basically, cities like Pleven and Tarnovo are sieged by the Russians. Now, in order to prevent Ottoman reinforcements from coming up to, again, reinforce these cities like Pleven, the Russians use mainly Bulgarian militiamen to hold the mountain passes in the Balkan Mountains. So again, the Russians command Bulgarian militia, Bulgarian revolutionaries, and they move small groups of these Bulgarian militiamen up into the mountains to, again, hold these passes to prevent the Ottomans from crossing north towards these sieged cities. Now, the most of these Ottoman troops who try to break through these mountain passes are under the command of a Ottoman named Suleiman Pasha. Now, Suleiman Pasha controls about 30 to 40,000 Ottoman troops. And what Suleiman Pasha does is he attempts to break through the Russo-Bulgarian defenses at the pass of Shipka. And this will be where the Battle of Shipka Pass occurs. Now, at Shipka Pass, there are about 8,000 Russian and Bulgarian troops. The majority of these, about 5,500 to 6,000, are Bulgarian militia, with around 2,000 Russian regulars supporting them, and this is again commanded by Russian officers. Now, as you can see, the Russians and the Bulgarians here are heavily outnumbered, basically 8,000 to roughly 30 to 40,000. Now, the reason why they're outnumbered is because the Russians thought that Suleiman Pasha would attack further to the east near the town of Elena. So that's where the majority of the Russian forces were concentrated, this town of Elena, 80 kilometers east of Shipka Pass. So when Suleiman Pasha attacks the Bulgarians and Russians at Shipka Pass, the Russian commanders start moving the troops which are stationed in Elena towards Shipka Pass. But again, like I said, this is 80 kilometers away. This is during the month of August of 1877. It's extremely hot. and basically Russian troops have to march very quickly from Elena, 80 kilometers to the west, to Shipka Pass through the August heat in order to reinforce the 8,000 Bulgarian and Russian troops that are stationed there. Now, at Shipka Pass, when the Ottomans confront the Bulgarians and Russians, it is a nightmare for the Bulgarian and Russian defenders. Basically, they are facing, at first, endless infantry waves. Basically, the Bulgarians and the Russians kind of take the high ground and try to defend themselves against these endless waves of thousands and thousands of Ottoman infantry, which try to break through the Bulgarian and Russian defenses. And not only I should say that the Ottomans are not successful in these kind of frontal assaults. The Bulgarians and Russians, due to kind of taking the high ground, are able to kind of repel these kind of first waves of Ottoman charges. However, Suleiman Pasha then decides, instead of kind of attacking from the front, he will move his troops around the Shipka Pass, essentially kind of moving up and trying to take some high ground around the pass, and essentially attacking the Bulgarians and the Russians from the high ground with artillery, with Turkish sharpshooters, and they kind of start decimating the Bulgarians and the Russians. It is, like I said, kind of hell on earth here for the defenders, and eventually they will run out of ammunition, they will run out of food and water, and the situation kind of looks hopeless. Basically, once they run out of ammunition, they start defending themselves with rocks, with stones, with their bare hands. It looks like the defenses will break and that the reinforcements will not get there on time, and Suleiman Pasha will break through the defenses, push through Shipka Pass, and will be able to reinforce the Ottoman defenses at the city of Pleven. Now, in this most hopeless of situations, when it seems that the defenders will not be able to hold the pass, the Russian commander, a Major Chilyaev, addresses the Bulgarians and states, quote, "Brothers, our enemy has surrounded us on all sides, so there is no way of retreating. We will hold until help comes, but if help does not come in time, we shall put our bones to the liberation of Bulgaria." Now, like I said, right before the defenses break, finally the Russian, pretty much like in a movie, right at the last minute, these Russian reinforcements from Elena arrive. They reinforce the Bulgarian and Russian position, and they push Suleiman Pasha back out of the mountains and manage to hold Shipka Pass. So this is kind of the decisive moment in this Russo-Turkish war. From this point in time, the Ottomans they start retreating back. The Russians and the Bulgarians started advancing towards Istanbul. Now, the Russian forces, kind of supported with these Bulgarian militia, basically reach the outskirts of Istanbul and are ready to siege the Ottoman capital. At this point, the Ottomans sue for peace, and the Russians and the Ottomans sit down in the district of San Stefano, just outside of Istanbul, and sign the Treaty of San Stefano. Now, what this treaty does is it grants the Bulgarians a de facto independent state. So, as you all know, I don't really put up graphics in my videos, but in order to kind of give you an idea of what this map of San Stefano, Bulgaria looks like, I will put this map here in front of you if you can see. So, the Treaty of San Stefano, which the Ottomans and the Russians agreed to, is basically there will be a Bulgarian state within the boundaries of this dotted line. So this is a large kind of Bulgarian state. You can see here Macedonia, Ohrid, Skopje, this is the Macedonian region. You see here, this is kind of the majority of the Thracian region, Mysia, and a little bit of Dobruja, although the northern portions of Dobruja do not fall within this San Stefano, Bulgaria. So this is, again, the treaty will grant the Bulgarians control of these main historically Bulgarian territories, Macedonia, Thrace, Mysia, Dobruja. Now, this is excellent for the Bulgarians. The Russians are also very happy with this. However, not everyone is happy with this Treaty of San Stefano, namely the great European powers. Great Britain, France, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they're not pleased with this Treaty of San Stefano. Basically, they do not want a large Russian-backed Bulgarian state in the Balkans, especially one, if you can see here, the San Stefano, Bulgaria has access to the Aegean Sea. It's understood that if this San Stefano, Bulgaria is formed, that the Russians will be essentially given ports, naval ports on the Aegean Sea, and that therefore the Russian Navy will have direct access to the Mediterranean, and the great powers of Europe do not want Russia to have direct access, naval access to the Mediterranean, and therefore they're not having this Treaty of San Stefano. They put massive pressure on Russia, and Russia agrees that the Treaty of San Stefano, in order to avoid a conflict with the other European powers, that they will renegotiate the Treaty of San Stefano. So 3 months later in Berlin, there will be a Congress which will be held, a Congress of all the European powers known as the Congress of Berlin, at which point all these European states will sit down and redraw the map, agreeing to a new treaty. This new treaty will be known as the Treaty of Berlin. Now, if we can see here, the Treaty of Berlin is not the dotted line, but the solid lines. So instead of having this large San Stefano, Bulgaria, the Treaty of Berlin creates two entities. You see this state here, that is the Principality of Bulgaria, which is created. And then down here you have Eastern Rumelia. So these are two entities that are created at the Treaty of Berlin. Now, you can see here this Principality of Bulgaria is very small when you compare it to the large San Stefano, Bulgaria. It's less than 40% of the entire state. So we have, it's less than 40% of the territories granted to Bulgaria in the Treaty of San Stefano. It's a massive territorial reduction, this Treaty of Berlin. So this Principality of Bulgaria is essentially a de facto independent state under a Bulgarian prince. Now, you'll see here, like I said, there's another entity called Eastern Rumelia. Eastern Rumelia is kind of a compromise. Eastern Rumelia is still directly under Ottoman control. It is not, independent like this Bulgarian, or autonomous, I should say, like this Bulgarian principality. It's under the direct control of the Ottomans. However, the Ottomans agree that they will withdraw their military forces from this Eastern Rumelia, that governorship of this Eastern Rumelian region will be given to local police forces. So basically the Bulgarians are allowed to police and govern themselves. However, they are still within direct Ottoman jurisdiction. Now, as you can see here, if you can see the dates on there, it says 1878 to 1855. In 1855, these two states will unite. However, as of right now, in 1878, those are the two entities that are created at the Treaty of Berlin. So, as you can see here, what this Treaty of Berlin does, is it returns the territory of Macedonia and a good chunk of Thrace back to the Ottomans. So the Bulgarians who are living in Macedonia and in Thrace are not liberated, they again find themselves under Ottoman control. That is the agreement at the Treaty of Berlin, that the Ottomans will retain these Macedonian and Thracian territories. Now, like I said, due to this treaty, we still have the Macedonians and Thracians, the Bulgarians in Macedonia and Thrace, remaining under Ottoman control, and therefore they will need to liberate themselves at a future date. So we see here in the year of 1893, these Bulgarian revolutionaries will meet in secret and form an organization with the goal of liberating the Macedonian and Thracian territories of Bulgaria. And that will be the discussion for the next video. So until then, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.